The next best thing to an axe in a lot of ways is a wedge and a mallet, right? A wedge plus force, right? Doesn't cut, right? But you've got a knife. You can get a little crack going in something and then apply this. You can do a lot. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors in the Cheap, and today I'm going to talk about two of the most simple yet important bushcraft tools there are. And these are things you don't buy, these are things you make when you're out in the woods. I mean, most bushcraft people talk about knife, saw, axe, things like that. But two very important tools in the bush when you're trying to use wood, okay? You're in the forest, there's wood everywhere. That's the most fundamental raw material, rocks and wood sort of thing, right? The wood's one of the most important raw materials. Knowing how to manipulate it, shape it, fashion it into things you need is very important. And two really useful tools that you can make quickly and easily to do that in the woods are the mallet and the wedge, right? They don't have to be anything special. They can be, shaped like this. They can be sort of really fine and tapered like this one, or kind of fat and steep like this one. Really depends on what you need them for. But with those two tools, you can do a lot. So I'm going to bring you in here and show you a little more close up what I'm talking about, and some things to think about when you're making these tools so that you can get the most out of them. All right, so come on, have a look. So whatever situation you're in, if you've got a large piece of wood that you need to turn into a smaller piece of wood to shape it into something that you need. Very recently I did a video where I took a tree, felled it, sectioned it into a 6-foot piece, and split that into smaller pieces and carved it into a canoe paddle. But whatever situation you're in, even if it's just as simple as getting into the inside of a piece of wood so that you can get to the dry stuff to make a fire, whatever it is, you can have the power of a giant. you can amplify your power by just the most simplest of I guess you could call a wedge a machine. By using the wedge and using a mallet, you've only got so much strength in your body, but by using those two things and your physics and your human ingenuity, there's a lot you can do. You can pry apart some pretty big pieces of wood and do some pretty interesting things with a wedge and a mallet. So for me, let's start with the mallet. I've seen lots of YouTube videos where they make things that look exactly like a hammer, or they take a log and shape it into something really pretty looking. But really, to have a decent mallet, what you need, to me anyway, is a handle that's comfortable to hang on to, and a pounding end that's a bit fatter, ideally with a sort of flat side, right? That's all you need. So there's nothing too sophisticated in doing that. You find something that's adequate relative to your needs, whether you have an axe or a saw or whatever, give it a bit of get into a shape you want, right? And then you just use your knife. Like today I haven't got an axe in the woods today, I just got a knife. So that's all you'd use. And of course the amount of time and energy you put into shaping that sort of thing really is relative to how much time you have to work with, right? How much of a rush are you in? Now ideally this is not, you usually want green wood for a mallet, but you don't have to have that, right? But I mean, you don't have to go too crazy. The handle has to be just the right size for your hand so that it's comfortable enough to use without getting too much fatigue. See how I'm wiggling this? When I get stuck, you just wiggle it and that helps you get down. Okay, so that didn't take long. So in a relatively short amount of time, right, I got a flat surface. That just helps, like when you're pounding, right? It just you're going to pound a lot truer if you've got a flat surface for pounding. So you got a nice skinny handle to hang on to, nice flat surface to pound on. You could use the tool. Only takes a couple minutes, and now you've just gone, you know, sort of from the Stone Age to the Industrial Age sort of thing, right? So that's the mallet. The first hammer, ideally, you know, in a sense, right, if you think about human beings and them learning how to use the materials around them to solve problems, this was the first hammer, right? And with our knife and our saw, we can make that into something a little more functional with very little work, right? So now we get to the wedge. When you're making a wedge, you want to have ideally, you want the wood. This isn't a hard, fast rule, but you want the wood that your wedge is made from to be harder than the wood you're trying to split with it. Again, it doesn't have to be like that, but that's ideal because your wedge is going to hold up longer and last longer. I mean, if you're just building a wedge for a one-time thing and you're going to leave everything where it is, and you know, if you're in a camp somewhere and you need a wedge for something and you're making a quickie wedge and you're going to move on and everything's just going to be left where it is and you're never going to see it again, you know, throw it in the fire or whatever. Doesn't matter so much. But if you're making a wedge where you want to use it multiple times, I'm not talking about something you're going to have, you know, in your shop forever. I actually use wedges in my garage at home all the time. I make them out of broom handles. Just get an old broom handle. It's good hardwood, and you know, sand. You know, like carve it into a nice shape, sand it. It'll last a really long time. It's top quality wood, right? So you want that to last. Put a little bit of linseed oil on it, and it'll make it last. All that sort of stuff. But out here in the woods, you know, if you want something to last for multiple applications but not forever, you just take a little more time, find a decent piece of hardwood. Dead hardwood, not green, dead hardwood that's dry but not too dry. This one here, this is I mean, there's different, you know, diameters, right? You can have a big fat wedge like this, and you can have finer ones. It really depends on what you're trying to do and how much force you want to apply and so on and so forth. You know, it's always good to have, you know, different sizes, of course, right? But they don't have to be something big like this. It can be something, I mean, you can do a lot with even something narrow like this, especially if it's from a hardwood. So, I mean, I've done videos where I'm making these things with an axe, but you don't need that either. I mean, let me zoom in a little bit here on this spot. All right, so I mean, there's different ways to work wood, but you know, one of my rules is a vise is nice. This is a tree stump where I took out a tree, so it's also just sort of ideal for filming. So one great way to shape wood is to do it against something wooden like this, right? I'm on a bit of a knot here, but anyway, all I'm doing is pushing down and I'm wiggling it back and forth. Can't hurt myself because it's going into the log, right? Now, actually this has a bit of a bend to it. I'm going the wrong way. Should go this way. All right, let's take it that way. And the width of the wedge isn't super important. Can be useful to have a wider wedge. Now this one here is just taking a funny shape because of the knot and the shape of the wood. But I think it's okay the way it is. Kind of a weird, you see here, just because this had a bend, right? All the bark is here, right? What am I trying to say here? The stick had a bend in it, so I just cut the bend off. Now I've got the hardest wood. It doesn't have to be this way, but I got the hardest wood, sort of the outside part at the point. This would probably be a wedge that'll last a long time. Doesn't have to be that way, but yeah, this piece of wood here, it had a bend like this. So I just cut the bend off on this side so that one side of the point is actually the outer edge. The outer edge of wood tends to be the strongest and the hardest. But now the next thing we want to do is chamfer that side. So chamfering just means taking all the hard corners off And the best way to do that is to do that using what's called a push cut. I'm pushing with my thumb here, right? And you just work your way all the way around, right? Going slowly just because it's trying to get this in the camera. If I was doing it, you know, not on film, I would do it closer up to my body like this with this sort of cut. Or against a log, it's another way to do it. Anyway, all you're doing is you're removing the edges so that the end has that sort of shape. See how it's rounded? That way when your mallet hits it, it's less likely to bust the thing up and break it apart. It'll just last a bit longer. You can take some of the bark off, you can leave it on. That's really, you know, really up to you. Sometimes I like to remove a bit of bark just so that it stands out. It never ceases to amaze me how easy it is to lose stuff when you drop it, because it just blends in. You know, natural materials tend to blend in. You know, funny, you know, isn't it? Believe it or not, when you drop something that's the color of bark on the ground, it just sort of disappears. Anyway, there's a really, really basic wedge, right? But that's a good one and it'll last, and it's very useful, right? Anyway, just a couple thoughts on the wedge and the mallet. Basic tools, fundamental bushcraft tools. You can use them in so many different ways. If you're ever in a situation where you're trying to pry two things apart or get something opened up, instead of, you know, using your sharp metal tool or, you know, taking huge risks or trying to use all your muscle power, I mean, just the lightest tap on this. In terms of prying apart, if I can get this into a crack and get that going, just the lightest tap is stronger than I'm like 215-pound, 6'4" man. But just that light tap, whoops, just that light tap is stronger than all the force I could put on pulling something apart, right? Just an amazing harnessing of physics, harnessing of energy to, you know, affect whatever solution you need to affect if you're in a situation where you need to pry things open, get things opened up. And, you know, really, if you're in the woods and you don't, think about an axe, right? An axe is a wedge. It's an edge that you almost throw at things, right? It's a wedge attached to a handle that you add velocity to, add acceleration to, and aim at things. It's a wedge aimed with force, a really hard wedge. Very, very useful tool. The next best thing to an axe in a lot of ways is a wedge and a mallet, right? A wedge plus force, right? Doesn't cut, right? But you've got a knife. You can get a little crack going in something and then apply this. You can do a lot. Just something to play around with, especially if you're around a campground, you've got some wood cut and stuff like that. You know, fashion yourself a wedge and play around, see what you can do with it. You might find that you can make some pretty amazing things and, you know, do some pretty interesting tricks just using that little wedge. So a lot of different problems can be solved with the wedge. So hope you found it interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell if you want to be notified when I make a new video. And until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.